Did NACO have a conversation about impact fees? Is that what you said?
They did. It was not necessary. It was a Supreme Court case. And basically the ruling is kind of one half good for counties, one half bad. So,
Which is better than my personal batting average with them lately, so.
it was just interesting because
Recording in progress.
impact fees, and then now we have this coming down that we'll have to consider as well. So,
Adam Carrillo. Thank you. It is 5:00 p.m. and I now call the Richland County Development and Services Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Branham.
Here.
Teratio.
Here.
Barron.
Here.
English.
Present.
Newton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item of business is approval of the minutes. They are in your packet on pages 5 through 6. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Branham.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 3, the adoption of the agenda. Mr. Administrator, any changes?
No requested changes.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll for adoption of the agenda?
Branham.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. We have 2 items for action on our agenda today. Item 4A is the amendment to Chapter 17, Section 9, through truck traffic prohibited. That's in your packet on pages 7 through 11. Mr. Brown, is there someone who'd like to address this item?
So I'm going to take just a moment, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. I'm going to read off pages 8 and then go back to page 7. And then if there are specific additional questions at that time, I'll ask County Engineer Fuller to come down and address the committee. But looking under strategic and general discussion, this is going to kind of tell you where this is kind of deriving from and why the recommendation from staff is as it is. So on page 8, it says Clearwater Road, Crestbrook Road, and Edgewater Drive are residential roads inside a neighborhood with front-facing homes that are being used as a cut-through between Park Lane Road and LeGrand Road. This is in an older neighborhood without sidewalks where pedestrians are walking in or along the edge of the road. Truck traffic cutting through this neighborhood has increased in recent years, posing a danger to residents walking through the community. Public Works supports the addition of these roads to Chapter 17, Section 9. This addition to Chapter 17, Section 9, prohibiting trucks to use them as a shortcut. These are South Carolina Department of Transportation maintained roads, and if approved, SCDOT would take action to manufacture and install appropriate signage. And going back to page 7, under staff's recommendation, it is staff's recommendation that the amendment to Chapter 17, Section 9, to add the following roads to through truck traffic prohibited. And so that's why this item is before the committee. That is staff's recommendation, and that's why this item is before you on this evening.
Thank you. We've heard staff. Any questions, or is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second. I do have a question.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilwoman Teratio.
Thank you. And so I represent the district that includes, or part of the district that includes Olympia Avenue. And one of the things that we have had discussions about a lot in neighborhood meetings is around just enforcement of this no through truck traffic. Thank you. And so I wanted to ask, I mean, really, are we just approving the placement of signage and, or approving DOT placing the signage, and we then kind of don't have any further actions to take in terms of enforcement?
Attorney Wright, I don't know if you can answer that, but I think from our perspective, and we're certainly, if members of my team, County Engineer Fuller, if you have additional feedback that you're aware of, but Madam Councilmember Terratio, in response to your question, this is something that the county can do. So what we wanted to do was at least take an action that then allows for other enforcement to be available. So even though this is a SUDOT maintained road, this action that the county does triggers the opportunity for this then to happen. And so, whether that there's enforcement that can be done, if it's on a state road, I think there are certain people who can enforce items on a state road, and I think I'd like the county attorney, if you would, to address that.
Thank you.
So yes, what this does is give them, whatever the law enforcement entity, the ability to do something if someone transgresses this amendment or this chapter. So if there's a sign up saying that it's prohibited, then and they can point to that chapter, then that's something that they could ticket them or do whatever they need to do regarding it.
Just one follow-up question to that. I know that, for instance, when there's a new stop sign put out, that there's often placed an officer nearby to make sure that people recognize that the sign is there, and if you don't, then you get a little blue light and get pulled over and reminded that there's a stop sign there. So, do we know? Has there been any kind of discussion around bringing awareness to this from bringing law enforcement's awareness to this? I mean, I think I'm trying to ask a question around next steps in terms of once this sign is placed. I mean, would SCDOT reach out to law enforcement and say, hey, we've just placed this sign here. Please make sure folks notice it. Do we know anything about what happens afterwards?
Yeah, so specifically to answer your question, I do not know today. I can certainly tell you steps that we can commit to taking. So if the committee approves of the recommendation, and if council approves of the recommendation, then we can notify the Richland County Sheriff's Department. Again, just like we can give them the same information because of these issues, we're now asking that this be enforced. And I think, they have different community teams, and we can just make sure that they are aware of this and that we do want this enforced and that the council took this action to allow it to take place so that it wouldn't be a matter of whether or not it's something we sure that, the county wants to put effort into. So I can commit that my team will communicate with the Sheriff's Department and let them know that this is an item of enforcement that we would like to see take place. And that's why the committee and then ultimately council took this action.
And will we submit the full list of those roads to Richland County Sheriff's Department when it is approved?
We certainly, everything that was listed in here that was shared, I will provide to them as well as a part of that public document.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilwoman Barron.
Thank you. So several of these roads are in my district, and I think I just want to publicly thank Mr. Maloney and Engineer Fuller for really providing lots of support to the Springwood Lake community. And I think having this, because we had this conversation a month ago or 2 months ago during our community meeting when SCDOT was actually present. And it was a very, it was a somewhat kind of heated conversation because here it is, an older community that is now being used as a cut through for not just trucks, but all kind of vehicles, and part of which is because the roads are closed. With the roads being closed, it does lend for them to have shortcuts and to note that this is a walking community. I've been visiting with the HOA president and standing on the side of the road and literally had to jump to keep from getting hit from a vehicle that was coming down this road, a truck that was coming down this one of these roads. So I think that putting this in action is going to be helpful. And as I've always stated, Mr. Brown, I feel comfortable and confident that you all will do that. But, you know, having a press advisory to let the community know that this is a change and that this is what they can expect, because I don't want us to look like a gotcha kind of situation, you know, like a little makeshift speed trap. But not we would do that. You laugh, Mr. Brown. Not that we would do that, but you know, I'm always looking out for the residents, whether they're breaking the law or not, but I think that we need to let them know that, hey, this is something that we're doing, and beware that this is something that we don't need you to do any longer. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman English?
I just wanted to just kind of go on the record and say, I can't speak for the Sheriff's Department, but I am so grateful that every community that I'm in, every neighborhood meeting that we have, they are there. Their presence is there, and they are constantly saying, let us know what you can do, what we can do, how we can help. And I'm just so proud of those guys. I mean, I really am. They know the neighbors by heart. I mean, they come to the neighborhood fish fries. They're there all the time. But they've really been good in all of my community meetings. So I just kind of wanted to highlight and just share. I'm excited for this change because a lot of these neighborhoods really do need this, especially Olympia. And I know Ms. Barron is speaking for her area as well, but we know Olympia, being a college town, actually needs this just so much. So thank you guys for that.
Councilman Branham?
I don't have the level of familiarity that some of you guys do with this area, so is part of what's happening is that Edgewater Drive goes over the top of I-77, and people, are they using it for a? Just looking at the map, it looks like there's a purple line going over I-77.
That's part of the bridge that's out, right? That's the bridge. I apologize, I'm just speaking all loud.
Quit it.
Yes. Maybe.
You're recognized, Engineer Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it is showing it going over I-77. I apologize. So coming off of Park Lane, they're using the two roads there, Crestbrook and Clearwater, and then they're getting onto Edgewater to make their way to LeGrand.
There's more than one alternate route to get to LeGrand without using those roads?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Please stay. Just one quick question for you, Engineer Fuller, and that is, I was really pleased to see this in my packet because I can imagine the concern that a community would feel about safety having a bunch of trucks cut through. I'm just curious, what is the process that happens for a road to be placed in this ordinance?
This is the process. If we get the request, we evaluate it internally to ensure that it is something that's happening, and that there are, as mentioned, alternate routes. Typically, neighborhood subdivisions are not going to be your primary route, especially for truck traffic. And this is within a subdivision. There are many other ways to get from one place to the other. So once we evaluate and determine it is something legitimate, then we bring it in front of the committee.
So, for example, if your average constituent was concerned and they reached out to the ombudsman, it would then get reported to you, which would start your internal review and evaluation process.
Yes, and we have reviewed others in the past. So yes, that is the process.
Thank you. Before you go, are there any other questions for Engineer Fuller? All right, thank you. We have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. Is there any additional discussion? Madam Clerk, will you call the roll for approval of item 4A?
Brenham,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes,
Motion approved.
thank
Barron?
you.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Ms. Barron? Thank you.
Hello.
I move that Ms. Barron be called on all future votes. No, just kidding.
Second.
Madam Chair, I was just note, she wrote a book. So, it's hard to forget.
Maybe if you put that next to her name placard and just stand it up there, then that'll be helpful.
A whole book. Who knew?
Additionally, we'll address item 4B. I move that the administrator look at the illegal dumping ordinance and state law and investigate the incorporation of a community service element in the penalty for illegal dumping, as well as look into the possibility of levying a higher penalty for businesses that engage in illegal dumping, including the potential revocation or suspension of their business license. Also incorporating an escalation schedule based on the weight of the material illegally dumped and whether the individual or business is a repeat offender within a 12-month period. That is in our packet, pages 12 through 9. Mr. Brown, is there anyone from staff who would like to address this?
Yes, I know he would love to address it. We're going to call on Director Michael Maloney to come down, just to give the staff's recommendations on this and to kind of provide a little bit more information, because we've kind of gone through this a couple of times and wanted to make sure that we come back with the updates as related to the last time we had this discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Maloney did look like he would love to address this. You called that right, Mr. Brown. Mr. Maloney, sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the council. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Staff does recommend approval of the proposed draft of the updated ordinance, which includes penalties for business involvement, hours of community service, fines, and potential for jail time. And so on, we have the attachment, which includes the changes within the ordinance that are highlighted on page 17 of 20. And that illustrates the section of the ordinance in Chapter 12, which is our solid waste ordinance. And this also has to, besides illegal dumping, cover things like scavenging, littering, uncovered loads, blowing things out of trucks. And so the motion that asked us to look at weight, for instance, or categories of it, helps with that. So under item C, this is any person who violates a provision with less than 15 pounds of material shall be deemed guilty of a misdemeanor and upon conviction shall be required to complete 15 hours of community service and not fine more than $500. And so that particular area would cover small illegal dump sites, but also littering and those other types of elements that the chapter needs to cover, such as how much material did blow out of a truck because it was uncovered, or scavenging would be something probably under 15 pounds as well. So that does help. And then item D is if you're over 15 pounds of a material and found guilty, then it's 30 hours of community service and not fine more than $1,092.50. And that's our current, or what our current ordinance fine is at $1,092. And then if you're a repeat offender of a second or more offense, within 365 days of the prior offense, so trying to cover that 1 year request on the prior motion, the community service shall be 50 hours and the fine shall be double, basically $2,185. And then it adds what we also had prior, which was that this is the first place we would have the potential for jail time of 30 days, or not more than 30 days. We were also asked to bring in issues with businesses involved. And the first thing I always think of is tires, and we're dealing with that right now. and that is ongoing. Any business identified to participate or to have participated or provided materials for improper disposal is subject to triple the amount of the penalties in 1266 C, D, or E. So basically following that same weight and growth, weight and then repeat offenders. And for 1266C is, if they have something under 15 pounds, first-time offense, it's subject to flagging the business license for renewal of consideration. And talking to business licensing, that is something where they flag it, and then when it comes up for its annual renewal, it can be determined whether or not they've kind of cleaned up their act and can continue on with the renewal, or if they have been subjected to a full, what we call a large illegal dump site or repeat offense, that would be subject to revocation of the business license. So those are the changes to the penalties under 1266.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Councilwoman English, you're recognized.
Yeah. Y'all left it off.
I apologize that we missed that. Councilman Branham and then Councilwoman Teresa.
Thank you. I know one of the objectives was to potentially align or not exceed the penalties that the state has for littering. And if the county wants to recommend that we go into executive session, we could. But when I'm looking at these monetary fine amounts, at least in D and E, they still exceed the $1,000 maximum under the state statute. I recognize that there's no imprisonment element in the drafts for C and D, so maybe that makes it less severe, but I wasn't sure if we needed to, be cognizant of that or take action to reduce the fine amounts so they did not exceed the state statute.
Mr. Maloney, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In taking the motion from the original motion, which was to look at, $5,000 fines originally, we did not glean that from the prior motion that fines should be reduced to the state level. But so they are still kind of where they are, that wasn't lowered. So I agree. And if there's discussion on that.
Thank you. Any comment from you, Mr. Wright, before I recognize our next person?
No, I was just going to say that the committee can move to bring the numbers in line with the state statute if it so desires.
Thank you. Mr. Branham, does that conclude your comments?
I guess the only other thing I would note is that in subsection F, there is a tripling of the amount of the penalty for business that are violators. I do absolutely support a lot of what I see here and the intentions behind it, and I do want to make that clear. And I appreciate the fact, too, that business license eligibility may come into play as a penalty for businesses who violate this provision.
Thank you. Teresa and then Newton.
Thank you. And my question is about just the way that it's written. So just taking the C, for example, shall be required to complete 15 hours. Is that the minimum or is it up to 15?
Madam Chair?
Recognize Director Maloney.
It would be to complete 15 hours.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that is the minimum if you are caught and guilty of this misdemeanor, then you start out at 15 hours. And then I see in the enforcement part, it talks about the code enforcement officers, and then who who is in charge of ensuring that these folks, would it be the sheriff's department, complete their community service?
Madam Chair,
You're recognized.
thank you, ma'am. The refuse control officers are managed by Special Services, and Special Services has the community service program.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Barron, you're recognized.
Thank you. So I do agree with Councilman Brennan. I do remember us having conversation about keeping things in or alignment with the state as it relates to fines. So I definitely fully support that. And then I also want to say, it is up until I think maybe June, it's the great where we keep the emphasis is on litter pickup. So I think it's called Great South Carolina Cleanup or something like that is presently going on. So in the spirit of this, in the spirit of what's presently going on that we're celebrating in South Carolina, I think it's a great time for us to definitely put forth this motion to get things moving to keep Richland County clean. Thank you.
I'm just gonna just because I've been in line and I've been using. No problem. I'll recognize myself and then I'll recognize you, Councilwoman English. And I don't know if later somebody is going to want to make a motion, but the motion on the floor right now is for these revisions as written. And again, I've said this before and just, want to go on record here. I support all of these changes. I despise litter with a fiery passion, except I am not ready to send a person to jail because they littered, even if they littered again. That has real consequences on people's records, their ability to earn a livelihood. There are a lot of things that people do that I wish they wouldn't, that I think they should be penalized for. I cannot support sending someone to jail. So unless there is the will of the body to remove that, which I know is an important part of this, which is why I won't myself make the motion, if we're willing to remove the jail time, then this is something that I can support. But otherwise, even though I think every other word in this ordinance is fine as written, I'm going to be a no vote because on page 17 in item E, it says shall be imprisoned for not more than 30 days. And I just can't support that. What'd you say? I mean, you're talking. Yeah, I can't support that. Councilwoman English, you're recognized.
Thank you. Just having a discussion with Councilman Branham. We have no problem with putting the current state fees, as I am in conversation with Representative Johnson, who is totally against this. So if we say current state fees, as they go up, we can go up. So I'm comfortable with that. And I'm comfortable with taking out shall be in prison. I agree with you, but I just believe they need to pick up trash.
I mean, we can make them pick up trash more. I'll even triple it. I just can't stomach sending them to jail.
Agreed with that. And one of the things that when we left the meeting last night, the town hall meeting, was going home on an open road. Last night I had another meeting going home. There was a mattress another mattress in the middle of the road. And
yes, I feel you. And if you ever hear me say send them to jail, just know it's metaphorical. I don't want to really do it. So I guess I have a question about your comment, and I'll recognize Councilman Branham. So what I heard Councilwoman English say is putting something in here about the current state fees. Would the cleanest thing be to say would the cleanest language be not to exceed? What would be the best language in the motion to align keeping those on par?
Yeah, it would be not to exceed whatever the number is in the state statute.
Thank you. Councilman Branham, did you have a comment or were you ready to make a substitute motion?
I was going to make a substitute motion.
You're recognized.
So the substitute motion would be to recommend to the full council that we adopt the ordinance as drafted in our packet, but with the following changes. Where there's any reference to a dollar amount for a fine, that we would just instead reference the amount authorized by state law, which would allow it to, move with any changes to state law. If the fines increased, our fines would increase. And that we would remove the reference in subsection E to "and shall be imprisoned for not more than 30 days." And then finally, that we would remove the reference in subsection F to tripling the amount of penalties for businesses that violated the provision. And instead, they would just also be subject to whatever fine was authorized by state law.
We have a motion on the floor
Second.
and a second. Madam Clerk, do you need that motion repeated before I recognize Administrator Brown? Mr. Brown, you're recognized.
In reference to that motion, may I address Councilmember Brandon?
You're
Madam Chair?
recognized, Mr. Brown.
Would you also be willing to include the language related to community service hours? Because they also have a number in there that's less than what we communicated in our community service hours. They had like up to 32, and I think we had 50.
Yeah, yes, I would.
You would consider that?
I would like to include that in my substitute motion.
Does the seconder of the motion accept that? Discussion. All right, I'll
Yes,
I'll
yes.
discuss. I understand, I think, why we wouldn't want to exceed the fines that are imposed by the state. Is there any reason that we would not be allowed to exceed the volunteer service hours in our ordinance? And if that's, legal advice we need to take in an executive session, we will. But long story short, I am completely 100% comfortable asking for more community service. Those mattress people, they need to do they need to clean. It's good for the soul. So does that legal advice that we would need to take in executive session, or can you address, if those need to be equal or can differ?
I think with that, I don't foresee that we would get pushback from the state regarding that, regarding community service.
Okay, so we have a substitute motion on the floor that would, not using the verbatim language, it would make the financial fines not exceed what is currently being charged by the state. It would remove in item 1266E the phrase "and shall be imprisoned for not more than 30 days. It would remove in section F tripling the amount of penalties and because that also would correspond with state law. And did you second the change the volunteer hours, Councilwoman Barron? And it would make the volunteer hours in line with state hours. So my question before we call the vote, Mr. Wright, is, so we have a motion, we have a substitute motion. I would like to motion, however is appropriate for me to do so, that we keep the volunteer service exactly as is. Can we have another substitute motion? Is it a request for a friendly amendment? What allows that to happen? Or hold on, it looks like the maker of the motion might be.
I would accept a friendly amendment along those lines if
Okay.
that's your request.
All right.
Friendly amendment.
Although I think Robert says there are no amendments that are actually friendly. No, I'm just kidding. So I would like to offer, no I'm kidding, well, I'm not really, but I would like to offer an amendment to the substitute motion to retain the current volunteer hour penalties as written on page 17.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded for the amendment to the substitute motion. I don't know exactly which one of those things we'll be voting on now, but Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Brenham,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Does that conclude all of the voting, or do we need to go? Yay, everybody, except for you mattress people. Y'all do right. That brings us to, yay again, yay, Councilwoman English. That brings us to item 5A, items pending analysis, no action required. There's a motion to direct the administrator to research and present to council current laws and benefits of enacting impact fees in Richland County. The purpose is to help reduce the tax burden on residents by not having to pay the complete cost of development in Richland County. You do have an update on page 20, where you will see that Richland County has engaged with a firm to come back to us with recommendations, and that they are in the process of gathering information from the county. Are there any questions, or do we need further information from staff on this? All hearts and minds appear to be clear. So clear that that leads us to item
Move to
6.
adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Brenham,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion